city. I'll tell you what, the sun shines a lot brighter. Ryan, don't you think when the Oilers win last night, my wife and I are lying in bed, the horns start honking all over the city. You always know when the Oilers are winning, and you always know when they're losing because it's dead silent outside.
Exactly. The vibe of the city depends on the Oilers. And also, quick shout out to my mother. Happy birthday, happy 48th birthday to Mrs. Reed. Rita Reed, shout out my mother.
Happy birthday, Mother Reed. I don't know what you did wrong with your son, but I'm trying to correct it. So, just joking, Brian. Happy birthday. We have a great show today, and here on the basketball show, we've got just such a great show today. My good friend Ben Golliver comes back. Again, he and I go into the weeds real deep. Now, we recorded this on Wednesday, so some of the content will be a little bit dated, but that's okay. Just look for the gems, the insight, the intelligence behind all of Ben's opinions, and I think you're going to really enjoy our conversation. And I'm excited at the top of the hour, we welcome back Alan Horton, who is the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we're going to talk about the seemingly insurmountable challenge that the Wolves are up against the rolling OKC Thunder. And I'll tell you what, they have been rolling and impressive as all get out. So every week we're presented by the 2025 Hoop City 3x3 Festival, July 31st to August 3rd in the Ice Palace here in the beautiful West Edmonton Mall. We have 4 FIBA 3x3 events going on. We just announced yesterday that teams from across Canada can be competing to get into the FIBA 3x3 tournament world with 2 tournaments on July 31st and August 1st. It's the largest FIBA 3x3 event in North America, best teams in the world, including our great Canadian women's team. And we have 8 Olympic finalists showing up, playing on both the men's and women's side. So it's going to be quite a spectacle. And before we dive into the NBA and all of the other great stuff that we have to talk about, I'll mention 3x3 and that Team Canada is in Baku, Azerbaijan right now, competing for the last spot in the World Cup. And Canada is off to a great start, winning their pool with victories over Great Britain and the home Azerbaijani team, led by Edmonton's Steve Sir, my son. Very proud of him. Leading scorer after the pool play, 10-7, hitting threes at a high efficiency rate, and the team looks very, very good. They've got a nice squad, an experienced squad, and fingers crossed as they go into the pool play or into the quarters, semis, and finals tomorrow in qualifying for the World Cup. All right, Ryan, let's talk about our poll question. Let's see if this can be the first 100%.
I doubt it'll be 100%.
Well, this might be the one, but please proceed.
We're asking Finals MVP over on our Twitter, basketball_show. We're talking about who's going to win the Finals MVP. The candidates on our poll are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, and Tyrese Halliburton. I wonder who Paul thinks is going to win that one.
Yeah, I mean, how can you possibly find any reason, even as great as all 4 of those players are, how can you find any reason to vote against, at this juncture, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which is a great segue. Oh, and by the way, our text line, 1-833-401-1440, 833-401-1440. We welcome your insights, comments, questions, observations of the NBA, WNBA, the recent selections for the NBA, the final selections, which we're going to dive into in a little bit. So again, 833-401-1440. All right, so before we dive into the games, let's talk about the awards. For the second Canadian, Steve Nash won the MVP twice. One was highly controversial, but be that as it may, he won the MVP twice. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander won it somewhat convincingly over Nikola Jokic. And Ryan, there are still a lot of people who believe that Jokic's historically significant statistical season merited him being MVP again for the 4th time. He's been an MVP 3 times, finished second in the balloting twice now. But I'll tell you what, the season Shea had, the efficiency he plays with, the record of the Thunder, the leadership he provides, you have to look at it and go, that was the right choice. That absolutely was the right choice. As much as I love the way Jokic plays and respect how he competes on a damaged team, you still have to give it to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
Exactly. So the 68 wins is what jumps out for me.
Absolutely.
And I think it's 33-6-5 on 68 win team. That it feels like it's almost every year you're going to get that, even if the stats are superior on a team that's I think the 51 wins for the Nuggets. So the 17 win difference is huge in my mind. And while I love Nikola Jokic, and I think a lot of OKC Thunder fans, including my brother, cannot stand Nikola Jokic, like the discourse to discuss him to be the MVP, I think it has to be mentioned and talked about, but I still vote Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
When you say that, clarify that for me. Are you saying they don't like Nikola Jokic at all as a player, or as a rival, a worthy rival in the MVP conversation?
I'd guess it's the latter, but I think maybe a little bit of the former. One of my friends as well is a Thunder fan, and he hates Jokic a lot.
And he's still your friend.
He's still my friend, so maybe,
it's a free
reevaluate.
Country. It's a free country. Everybody has the right to be wrong.
No, but I think they just don't want it to be close, so Shea can win it, right? So I understand that aspect, but I do think it has to be talked about. Like as an objective fan on that thing, I just want to have both the discourse of both brought forward and then go from there. And I think after having both brought up, I can go with Shea. But it feels like maybe some OKC fans just go Shea, or some Nuggets fans honestly just go Jokic without even thinking about it.
That hometown fans always think, always can hardcore hometown fans always favor their team, whether it's an individual or a team. But again, going back, not only did he deserve it, but the eloquence, the humility, the kind-heartedness of his acceptance, I think was worthy of the MVP. I'm so glad he won the MVP just so that we, the viewers, had an opportunity to get an insight into a pretty quiet guy. Like, Jokic is not one of those guys. And what I love about some of the things that are happening in the NBA right now is that humility, toughness, hard work is replacing flash, outlandish behaviors. And I think there's more of a lunch pail culture, a humble, blue-collar lunch pail culture of superstars emerging in the NBA that I think is fantastic for this league. I really do, because once they figure out how to get everybody to, not everybody, so many players and coaches to stop ragging on the officials after almost every call. When they get that, if they ever get that figured out, I think the NBA becomes even more watchable. But having a guy like Gilgeous-Alexander out there doing what he does in the way that he does it is so great. And I'm thinking of the kid watching the game being played. It's cool to shoot a mid-range shot. It's cool to do the things, and then it's cool to be humble about it.
Do you have a strong opinion on the foul bait culture that Shea has kind of conjured up around himself?
Yeah, I do. Yes, he does, and he does it very well. But I'll compare him to who I think is the biggest flopper in NBA history, and that's James Harden. James Harden drove me nuts because
he walked so Shea could run.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, that's true. The thing about Shea, though, is he's not. I'll compare him to James Harden and LeBron James, and from this standpoint, I don't perceive Shea Gilgeous-Alexander as a flopper. I don't perceive him as someone who is overly dramatic trying to sell the foul. Does he bait opponents into fouling him? Absolutely. Sometimes do the refs get it wrong? Of course.
But when you watch the replays of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on almost all of his fouls, they're fouls. It's because he's so crafty. He's not lightning quick. He's very quick. But he's lightning fast in the IQ department. And he baits defenders into leaning, into reaching, and frustrates them into committing fouls. And then afterwards they complain to the officials.
When he drives, he does this thing with his left arm where if the opponent puts his arm across the body, he'll hook it.
Yep.
And just walk. I mean, it's not exactly a fun watch when it's just a foul, but you have to respect the ability to bait that to a certain extent. And the other thing for me is with the whole Shai foul thing, I think he gets fouled. And then I feel like he exaggerates what was already going to be called a foul sometimes. Maybe that's like I think maybe it wouldn't be a call to foul sometimes, and maybe you need to flop it to show the refs like, hey, I got fouled, like
right.
Call it.
Yeah,
but I feel like he's getting fouled anyway, and then he goes like, boom, it's like he flies.
He does do the exaggerated arm follow.
Harden started the hook, the right hook.
The right hook and the flailing of the arms.
You're not Mike Tyson. Just
I know. And that whole hooking the defender's reach.
Was that around back when you played?
No, God, no. No, we weren't. We didn't think like that. I mean, we weren't. The way we played is very different than the way we play now. I'd love to do a show on then and now, but it's gotten much more sophisticated, certainly, and that's an example of it. And I think like with Shai, yes, he does, Ryan, but not to the extent I felt Harden does, and certainly not to the extent LeBron James. I have interviewed LeBron James, and standing next to him, 6'7", sculpted, like he doesn't look human. I saw him. In fact, here's a great LeBron James story. Back in the day of the International Basketball League, the failed Pro League 2008 through 2012 here in Edmonton, we had the chill for 1 year and the energy for the next 4. The first year for the chill, we went on a road trip down into the Chicago area. We played over in Indiana, came back to Chicago up to Battle Creek, Michigan. But while I was in Chicago, my friend Fitz was good friends with Tim Grover. Tim Grover is a legendary name in NBA training circles because he was Michael Jordan's trainer and Kobe Bryant's trainer. So Fitz got me into the hallowed halls of this Nike training center in downtown Chicago, and it was LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Paul working out. So I watched them work out for an hour, and then they had a bunch of other NBA guys in, and they played for 100 minutes. So it was NBA guys, European pros, and some NCAA guys playing for 100 minutes. LeBron's just a god. Like, he didn't look real. Like, he's out there doing the same drills you do that anybody can do. Nothing special. But then afterwards, 8 attendees come up to him. They're toweling him down. They're massaging him. They're rubbing him. You got a sense for how special the treatment was.
That's how they treated me in high school too.
Sherwood Park though. You guys are a bunch of cake eaters out there, so you spare no expense. But LeBron, here's where I'm going with that long-winded explanation. But LeBron, what he does that drives me nuts, which I think takes him out of the conversation as the greatest player ever, is his flopping, where he gets brushed and he goes flying off the court like he's been hit by a freight train. I think it is so demeaning to who he is as a player to have to act like that. And he still does it. Like, that's what drives me nuts, Ryan. He still does it.
Is the GOAT the only debate that be kicked out? Because we have flopped, both Jokic and Shai do that fairly often, and they're both in the MVP race. Like, where's the line for what you get kicked out of consideration for? If you flop, you can't be the greatest of all time.
Well,
where's the line?
My benchmark are Jordan, Bird, Magic. They didn't flop.
Yeah,
that was not in their repertoire. They didn't even think of it. You're getting clotheslined by Bill Laimbeer. Like, it was a ridiculous era. But neither Shai nor Jokic do what LeBron does. Neither of them. I mean, when you look at the clips of LeBron, it's ludicrous what the guy has done. And so he's great. Second team All-NBA this year at age 40. Unparalleled. He just doesn't need to do that. And to me, that takes away from his greatness, because that's what you would do when you're in junior high, for gosh sakes, not out there at 38 years old flopping around because you got touched by somebody trying to draw another foul. For me, that's again, old curmudgeonly guy that looks at it kind of black and white in that respect. You're listening to the Basketball Show, Sports 1440, the old curmudgeonly Paul Sir, along with the young, optimistic, starry-eyed Ryan Reed here on the Basketball Show. So, Ryan, let's dive into the Minnesota OKC series so far. I mean, the third quarter is legendary already of how the Thunder play, and they certainly have not disappointed, have they?
No, it's an interesting watch because if it's close for a couple quarters and then just like that, OKC pulls away. And we're getting in the conversation with OKC is if they keep this up with the regular season and playoffs combined, they're going to have one of the best seasons ever just for win-losses. They have a real shot at 84-17. Yeah,
they do.
And that's comparable to the Bulls in the 90s, the Warriors in the 2010s. Like, that's right up there with the all-time great teams. And we're asking questions like, oh, they're so young, can they do it? Well, they might be one of the greatest teams ever if they do this just win-wise.
They might be. And I think their margin of victory was an NBA record. It was the largest margin of victory for an average margin of victory over an entire season, and a record number of games where they won by over 10 points. So lots of blowouts, and they've done the same. I think they have 3 30-point blowouts in the tournament, in the playoffs so far. So they're great. So Minnesota was better in game 2, particularly in the first half. Now, I say better. It actually, in most respects, was an identical replay with just different players. Julius Randle was great in the first half of game 1, absolutely evaporated in game 2. No impact on the game, seemed completely flustered and frustrated by the pressure of Oklahoma City. And Anthony Edwards, who was very skittish in game 1, was much better. I mean, here's Edwards, 32 points, 12 for 26. That's a nice night. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is 38 and he takes 18 shots. I mean, the guy's efficiency is so impressive. His consistency in the mid-range shots is, again, so impressive. And this is where I hope league executives are getting all their analytics guys and telling them to fill their boxes up and go home. They're just going to take the data off the computer and factor it into their decisions on how they play, because Oklahoma City is shattering all that crap of threes or layups.
You're not a fan of that, eh?
It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And it's so stupid. And I've had conversations like Matt Bullard, great NBA player, longtime analyst, radio guy for the Houston Rockets, NBA champion with the Houston Rockets. Matt and I would go toe-to-toe on analytics. And yeah, you can make the statistical argument. I don't begrudge that. But the bottom line is you got to make baskets. So you've got a team in Oklahoma City who wins on defense first and mid-range.
Creativity in general.
Yeah, creativity, mid-range shots, because they're not shooting the three that well. And you got teams like Boston shooting 50 and 60 threes a game, and when they're not going in, you don't have a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to adjust. But to me, the beauty of this is I'm hoping coaches, for gosh sakes, open your eyes, and young players learn how to 1-2 dribble pull up. Learn how to play back to the basket. Learn those skills. It isn't just huck and chuck and chase, all of that stuff, pick and roll. There's a lot more, and I think it's on display with Oklahoma City.
You mentioned Shai Gil just breaking records. One of them he had just broke recently with the 30-point game against the Timberwolves. He has now his 5 straight 30-point games in the playoffs, and that breaks a franchise record.
Not surprised. I'm not surprised. I mean, the guy's incredible, but his teammates are incredible too. And I thought, when you look at the weapons that they have and how they all, I mean, right now, you could not find, I think, a more together, cohesive, and committed franchise than you have with OKC. They love each other. And of course, you know this, Ryan, when you're winning, everything looks great, when you're winning. So this is where Minnesota's challenge is. How do they reconfigure how they're playing against Oklahoma City in order to be able to come back and steal the game today. And I'll give you my opinion. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I'm just quick point. Just on I have a quick comment before you have your answer. Anthony Edwards just has to step up. He's shooting a lot of shots that he's supposed to take. They're just not really going in. He's shooting, as the kids say, tour dates nowadays, where it's like October 15th, like October 25th. Like he's like 10 for 25 or 12 for 26, and you have to hone that in. You have to be more developed offensively, and you have to hope for Gobert. I know you're one of your favorite players in Rudy Gobert. and Anthony Edwards to just step up. Because the games are close for a good while, and then OKC just outlasts them. So for me, it's Anthony Edwards stepping up and just hitting the shots that he's been hitting all season.
Yes, but the reason he's not hitting the shots that he hit all season is because Oklahoma City's a better defensive
team. Superstars transcend that, so maybe you can make the leap.
No, well, maybe so.
Because like Doncic and LeBron are making shots on the Timberwolves when they were covered pretty well too. And even against OKC,
wait a second. Yeah, that's right. Los Angeles won. They didn't win that series.
No, okay, but Jokic went to 7, and he had like 40 on the Thunder every once in a while.
But they bothered him. The games they lost, they bothered Jokic. Yeah. They made him uncomfortable.
But the games they didn't, they won. So maybe I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right and you're wrong. Here's where you're right. If Edwards shoots really well, the Wolves' chances of winning go up. But therein lies the problem of why the Timberwolves are in so much trouble is they're relying on Anthony Edwards to create his own shots against a defense that does more than any other defense to not allow you to comfortably
and they
create.
Control like 4 guys at Anthony too that are top tier defensive.
And I would also counter with this. Not only do they throw multiple athletic, outstanding defenders at Edwards, it's their help defense that differentiates them from everybody else. They help on the ball better than anybody. How many times do you see, whether it was Randall or Edwards in the first 2 games, trying to penetrate into the middle and getting the ball stolen because of the help side coming over and knocking the ball away or tipping a pass? So here's what the Wolves have to do. You have to play Rudy Gobert like he's Rudy Gobert. He's a 7'1", immobile guy who can basically finish at the rim and dunk. And you have to put him in a position where that can happen. And they don't do that often enough on offense. Number 2, they have to pass the ball more and dribble the ball less. Number 3, Edwards and Randall in particular have to do straight line attacks as opposed to the tap dance attacks where they're out there with the ball, moving it back and forth. And you know what happens when they do that? That allows the Oklahoma City defense to settle in and make an even more impenetrable wall. I almost got that out. Wall that makes it harder and harder to get to the basket.
It also gives rests for the defense. Like if Anthony Edwards walks down and goes bop, 4 or 5 dribbles, the guys in the corner are sitting there like, all right, we get an off possession. See you guys next.
And Randall wants to get all of his shots 25 feet from the basket. Like game 1 in the first half, he shot the 3 great. That's a fluke. That isn't how he's going to win. Why doesn't he get he's one of the strongest guys in the NBA. High-low action. Get the ball into the post. Randall seals his guy, drop it into him, and let him go to work closer to the basket. Why start 20 feet from the basket when you can start 10 feet from the basket, especially when he gets a switch like with Caruso. Caruso's 6'5".
It worked on Jokic.
And this is no slight to Caruso. I agree. It worked on Jokic. But part of the reason it worked on Jokic is Jokic was 20 feet from the basket. And this guy's quicker, and he's a pest. And the NBA is too forgiving of defensive players being in the cylinder of the offensive players.
Is it maybe a testament to the OKC just not letting them within 10 feet of the hoop to begin the possession?
No.
Or do you think they can get down there for sure every time?
When Jokic wants to get down there, he does.
Or same for Randall, too?
Same for Randall. I mean, how are you going to stop it?
Same for Gobert?
Yes, you could. Yeah. You could. So that's and then on defense, here's my biggest pet peeve. McDaniels is an outstanding defender. Like he's 6'9", 6'10", and so athletic and so mobile. Why in the world is he picking up the best player in the league 60 feet from the basket? Why? What are you going to do? You're going to steal the ball from Shea Gilgeous-Alexander?
Like draining the shot clock, right? But like, what's the point?
What's the point? Pick him up 8 feet outside of the 3-point line.
Save some energy as well.
Yes, and instead of having to switch every screen and roll, pick him up, go behind, and make Shea Gilgeous-Alexander become a 3-point shooter, because he does hit great threes. Like the other night, he had a step-back 3 that was just phenomenal. But if he shot 10 threes a game, he would score less than if he shot 4 threes a game, because his game is mid-range. Keep him out of the mid-range. Keep him out of the mid-range. Easily said, hard to do, because this is more about a better team winning than it is about a bad team competing.
It's a better team. One of the greatest teams we've seen, just for a pure system standpoint and personnel, I think, just how everyone meshes together.
Beautifully constructed. Everybody buys in.
And guess that they have 3 first-round picks this year.
I know. Abundance of riches. It shows genius versus stupidity in the league, but it also shows there's a bit of luck and there's a lot of skill in being a great GM. And I think when sometimes Boston kind of had this model a few years ago, a wealth of draft picks. Now they're having to make really hard decisions, because I think Oklahoma City at their young age really understands these opportunities do not come along very often, and they have to make the most of it right now. And their effort and everything that they seem to be doing appears that they buy into that very much and value this opportunity that they've created for themselves. A couple of quick comments before we go to break. Ryan, Indiana Pacers, New York Knicks. I think we kind of have a similar situation now where it's going to be really tough for New York. I'm stating the obvious. They're going back to Indiana after Indiana stole Game 1. And in probably maybe the most unique I don't know if it's the most dramatic, but it's certainly the most unique comeback I've ever seen.
It would have been more dramatic if it was actually a 3-pointer.
Yeah.
Like when they hit the legendary choke celebration for Tyrese.
Yep.
But it took away some of the drama when it went to overtime, but it was still ridiculous. The Pacers have 3 of the greatest comebacks in playoff history just in this playoff run alone. They do. Against 3 different teams.
And against 3 different teams and in 3 different ways. They're real easy for me to like.
They're kind of rejection island. Like, it's just guys that didn't work out in other places just killing it there, right? Like, I mean, Tyrese was fine, very good in Sacramento, but he's really flourishing in Indiana. Aaron Nesmith was the reason they came back that game. He wasn't even playing in Boston at times.
Wasn't playing, hit 8 threes in the fourth quarter. Like, that's just...
And some of the shots are like, he's like Curry. It's like 1-2 off the dribble.
I know. And they were
falling over.
They were great shots. It was just one of those magical moments that you rarely get to watch in sport. You're down 9 with 58 seconds left, and you find a way to come back, and just because your toe is barely touching the 3-point line, and it was on an outrageous shot. To me, one of the great graphics in basketball history was that shot of Halliburton taking that outrageous step-back dribble, thinking he's behind the 3-point line, letting it go, hitting the back of the rim.
Way up
out of the camera. The light on the backboard signifying the end of the game goes off, and the ball comes straight down through the rim. Unbelievable visual. Unbelievable.
Would you say that was a better visual than the Kawhi one?
Boy, I don't know.
That's both like just balls going around. No one knows what's going on.
You know what? That's a great comparison. I don't know. That was awfully good.
Yeah. We don't have to compare them either. We can just acknowledge they're both great moments.
They're both phenomenal moments. It's just so dramatic, and to have it result in the Pacers coming back from so far. And you know what? The Knicks took a lot of heat for blowing the game. I don't think they blew the game. They were still scoring. It's just that Naismith was outrageous, and the Pacers just were able to have enough magic in their pouch to be able to find a way.
Pascal Siakam is just continuously just going, and it's so he's played so many important games in his career. If you think about his performances he's had with the Raptors and with the Pacers now, he was great last 4 night. Eastern Conference Finals now, and
he was great last night.
He's been incredible.
Yeah, he was the best player on the court last night, and
up until the last couple minutes with Nesmith.
Well, yeah, Neesmith was fantastic last night at the right time. Like getting that kind of clutch play. I have such a soft spot for Rick Carlisle. Great player he was a good player with the Celtics, good role player, has been a steady coach throughout his career, and he really has his team. To me, an Indiana OKC final, it's kind of like OKC and OKC light in Indiana. They don't have the talent that OKC has, but they play similarly. They're not nearly the defensive team that OKC is, but they're problematic offensively because of the way they drive the ball. So if what seems right now to be inevitable finals matchup comes about, I think we'll be greatly entertained.
You think the NBA will be happy that it's the markets of Oklahoma and Indiana?
You know what? I hope not. And I say to heck with them if they're not. You want parity, and to have examples of great management in franchises in small markets be able to put this together. And let's look at it realistically. Indianapolis is like a basketball epicenter.
It's a basketball state, right, Indiana?
Oh, my gosh. I mean, of course, we all refer to Hoosiers, but the tradition in Indiana is as great in the sport of basketball as any place in the world in terms of their love for the game. And Indianapolis is an epicenter now with Indiana Fever in the WNBA, and we're going to talk about that later. They've had multiple Final Fours. They are just a phenomenal like this weekend, they've got the Pacers, the Fever playing the New York Liberty, the defending WNBA champion, and the Indy 500. I mean, that's a weekend for a city. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, you're going to hear part of my interview with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post. Ben has been in Oklahoma City covering the Thunder. Now, he and I talked before the first game of this series, or actually it was after the first game of the series, and I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation that we had because Ben's insights, as I often say, are just among the best in the basketball world. So thanks for spending your beautiful Saturday morning with us here in the capital city. This is Paul Sir and Ryan Reed here at your sports leader, Sports 1440 on The Basketball Show. Talking with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the deep dive of The Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir. I agree with you. Now, Edwards showed, I think, signs of that in a couple of other games in the two previous playoff series where he does seem to get rattled at times, which is an interesting characteristic in a player that is so much about his bluster and his athleticism and his talent. Last night, I agree with you in the second half. He seemed overwhelmed, and I think the fact that his pocket was picked when he was trying to go by his man, and the help side defense is so outstanding by Oklahoma City. And the way they force turnovers, the variety of ways they force turnovers, you really have to be on edge the entire time. Here's something, though, that I think is interesting. Minnesota's bench was dreadful in shooting the basketball, just horrific. One of the stats I read is that they created 30 open threes last night. Now, created 30 open threes and not making many, if any, of those. Is that a sign of hope for Minnesota that they can create these threes, that if they get, I mean, heck, if they even shot 30% from three last night, what were they, 15 for 51?
Yeah, it was ugly. No, there's no
like
question. They've had some duds in this postseason. They had one against Golden State. They had one against LA. And typically the Timberwolves duds are they just take a bunch of threes and miss them, right?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of ways they can adjust. The easiest adjustment is you cross your fingers and shoot better, right? And
Yes.
the Thunder will concede a lot of three-pointers. What they are completely focused on is we want to take away the paint because, they're a little bit undersized. They don't want Randall getting 35 points efficiently at the rim, which is what he was doing against the Golden State Warriors, it felt like, right? All those bulldozing drives where he gets the and ones and he gets the layups and he gets the dunks, that's the high efficiency stuff that Oklahoma City says, we're not going to give that to you. Anthony Edwards, free dunks and free drives to the rim, no chance. They want to take that away. They're willing to live and die with these Minnesota role players, and Minnesota has some really good role players. I mean, Naz Reid's been a sixth man of the year. Dante DiVincenzo has been a big-time player for a number of years, and they just did not show up in game one. So you can expect them to play better, and that should open things up a little bit as this series unfolds. But it goes back to this idea of who's the more complete team. If you're trying to live and die by that 3-point shot, that doesn't give you very much margin for error, right? Especially when Oklahoma City has such a great home court advantage where they're going to tire you out so you get those heavy legs in the second half. I mean, is it really a surprise these guys can't hit a three-pointer after they're running up and down the court against the Thunder all game long? Like, it shouldn't surprise anybody, right? And, we saw some tweaks to the rotation from Finch. He added a player here, a player there to try to get some more wings on the court. He didn't play Gobert as much, so he was trying to match up a little bit. Like, I'm thinking about Jalen Clark. He got some minutes really for the first time in the entire playoffs. That wasn't garbage time. But the problem is the talent gap is just massive, right? Whoever that guy, he's not playing for a reason, Jalen Clark. And now he's going against this very well-refined Thunder rotation, which just comes at you in waves and has so many different guys who are better all-around players than he is. So that's why it goes back to that depth disadvantage. For Minnesota, their stars have to carry this, right? It has to be massive nights from Edwards. It has to be massive nights from Randall if you're going to be able to kind of change this formula against Oklahoma City. And it's possible. I mean, look, we've seen Edwards score 40-plus points in the playoffs multiple times over the last couple of years. Like, he is capable of explosive offensive showing. But what I think when I look at this OKC defense, I mean, guys like Dort, Jalen Williams, and especially Cason Wallace was impressive in game one. They are making Anthony Edwards work harder than he wants to work. He's used to be able to just go and buy that first point of attack guy like all the great stars, and he's starting to try to read the defense behind him, right? Against Oklahoma City, if you try to look past that first defensive, point of attack defender, they're going to pick your pocket and go the other way, right? And so he's going to really have to adjust to that type of pressure. He mentioned he needs to be shooting more, and he also mentioned he needs to be getting off the ball more so that it's not just him, trying to slice through all the piranhas as you described. And we'll see if they make those adjustments. But, a big factor here is this Gobert deal. He got into very early foul trouble, and he really never got, back into the rhythm of the game. Finch decided to play smaller. And I think if there was anything to really be scared about, if you're a Timberwolves fan, obviously you're hoping to shoot the three better, but you have to play better defense with your small ball lineups, right? And Oklahoma City loves to go small. It was the key to their success against Denver. They're putting Caruso, a guard, a 6'4", 6'5" guard on Jokic. And when they go small, they can scramble you and increase that pace so fast. And your defense has to be able to cover a lot of ground, work hard, protect the paint, close out to shooters. And when Naz Reid was playing the five and they were going with their small lineups, Minnesota, it was just, it was too easy, way too easy for Oklahoma to score. And I think that's going to be something they have to try to figure out how to clean up. Otherwise, their option is we got to go big. We just got to stick with Gobert, try to slow the series down, try to junk it up, try to take away the rim from Shea and turn him into a jump shooter. Those are kind of your choices, and neither one's a great choice.
Well, they're not. And I, as I watched Shea knife through defenses, I thought that the Timberwolves actually did a really good job on him in the first half. In the second half, Shea became Shea, and especially when the T-Wolves went small. So I think the adjustments Finch makes in putting Gobert in situations where he can be more successful, like where he was catching the ball on the penetration from the Timberwolves was really awkward. I remember one time he caught it and he flipped it up behind him. He was trying to do some sort of 7'2" pirouette.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it was just brutal.
Paul, do you even, with his hands, do you even want him doing anything besides finishing lobs in this series? I mean, what are the odds he's going to get stripped anytime he has the ball, right?
Well, and that I think you've just hit on the key point is the T-Wolves. One of the things they do that drives me absolutely nuts, and I know that Finch is regarded as such a tremendous offensive coach, everything's off the dribble. Like there's so little off the pass that they actually get other than penetrate and kick to the three. And against the Thunder, you can't over dribble and beat these guys because they will pick your pocket. That's where I think, like to your point, at times they're going to have to see if they can slow it down and get the ball into Gobert in a position where he can just dunk the basketball or put it in around the rim or get to the free throw line, even though he's not a great free throw shooter. They've got to put pressure on Hartenstein when he's in the game, and they've got to be able, and if they go small, to your point, they have to just do a better job of rotating on defense. I watched the Timberwolves on defense and their defensive posture off ball, and the difference between them and the Thunder is they're just worlds apart. The Thunder are active in defensive stance. The Timberwolves are standing upright with their hands at their sides, and they're getting blown by. And that's why they get carved up.
And it could be one of those things where Oklahoma City comes off this amazing series against Denver where they were forced to play as hard as possible. And Minnesota had a pretty easy path through the playoffs, right? Like they took care of the Lakers very quickly. They took care of the Warriors without Steph Curry very quickly. I don't know if it made them overconfident, but I do think there's an adjustment period where you really have to crank up to the seriously high intensity basketball. And Minnesota, like you said, wasn't quite there. I think there's another big problem with Minnesota, though, when they go small, and it really doesn't have anything to do with protecting the rim like I was describing earlier. The problem is when they're small, they're really small. Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, all of those guys are giving up size at their position. Yeah. Pretty much anytime they're on the court against Oklahoma City, because those piranhas you've described typically are incredibly long and very physical, right? Caruso, Cason Wallace, Dort, all those guys are built like brick walls, very quick, very strong players. And so it's easy for them to just kind of gobble up these small Timberwolves guards. Again, that's why you have to go back to who are the physical players for Minnesota. Well, it's Edwards and Randall. Those guys have to be sensational to carry the day. I'm talking about averaging like 60, 65 points together if they're going to win this series, because I think that they have to just set a different tone. The other guy who did have some success early, who got into foul trouble, and so it kind of muted things, was Jaden McDaniels. He's an interesting X factor for the Timberwolves because he's so long. The problem is he's got to expend all this energy guarding Shea. That's a very frustrating and taxing job. And so he's another player, though, who could help loosen things up because he's got great physical tools. And if they do go small, he could be a player who really helps Minnesota. So that would be one X factor I would circle here as we try to figure out how Minnesota handles this thing. But yeah, I think in game 2, if I'm Finch, I might try to go back big, because Gobert was doing a pretty good job of making people work on the glass, and he's always doing a good job protecting the rim. See if you can just really muck this game up, slow it down, get it ugly. Don't, do the stuff you were talking about in terms of feeding him the ball and letting him try to make moves and go through that. Cut all that stuff out and just say, all you are is a dunker. All you are is a putback guy now, and see if that's a way to win. I mean, because they hung tight for a half, right? And I think that's something that they can build off of. But the scary part is Oklahoma City adjusted so well in the second half to what they were doing defensively that I'm already a little concerned this series could get away from Minnesota.
For good reason. And I'm really curious, though, about this Minnesota team, because like you said, they started out both of their other series poorly. Now, Golden State loses Steph Curry. That changes everything. The Lakers, as we discovered, they had nothing in the middle. They had no answers for the size and length, and they certainly don't play defense like Oklahoma City. So it's ratcheting up the pace, being able to withstand the pressure. Now that they've had this opportunity, because looking back on the season, they did split with OKC. So there are some reasons to look here and say, you know what, there's hope, but we have to adjust to them. Oh, they have to be able to take care of the basketball better. I agree with you. They have to try to use their size and length to their advantage. But here's where I want to go with the final question on this series before we jump over to Indiana and the Knicks. Ben, James Harden drove everybody nuts, especially during his glory days, about drawing fouls. Would you say, now I have my opinion, but would you say Gilgeous-Alexander is similar from the standpoint of he's selling the contact and creating the illusion to officials that he's being fouled when he really isn't? Or is Shea just that good at initiating contact and finishing through contact, shooting through contact, that it forces the officials to call the fouls on the defender?
Well, I think he's so relentless that there's a little bit from column A, there's a little bit from column B, there's a little bit from any column you want, right? I mean, there's a lot of times where he doesn't get calls and he'll just fling something up at the rim and the crowd groans because they're like, come on, Shea, stop trying to bait here, just play basketball. And so I thought that the conversation afterwards, I understand why it becomes such a big deal because everybody's tuned in, but the fouls had no impact on the result of this game. You take 100%. Away all of Shea's free throws, right? And they still win by double digits. And I think his shot making in the second half, I think he was 8 for 14 in the second half after starting really slow. There were some incredibly tough shots that he was hitting, but that's what he is, a tough shot maker, right? And not only that, he brings it on the defensive end as well. He just flat out outplayed Anthony Edwards. And so, to me, I think if people are concerned about, all he does is flop, all he does is, bait for calls. Well, he also drove to the basket, I think, almost 30 times in game one, whereas Anthony Edwards barely crossed the 3-point line in the second half, right? And so there's going to be contact there. I think a lot of the whistles he gets are deserved. And I've been in road arenas where I see the fans screaming and yelling, why does he get this call? And they show the replay on the Jumbotron, and it's an obvious foul. Anyone would know.
He got fouled, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a clear foul. So that's why I think, there might be 3 or 4 calls every game that are truly worth disputing, right? But Julius Randle had 5 turnovers, right? So which one of those things is more important in determining who won this basketball game? All the focus is on the foul calls. None of the focus is on the turnovers. And I think that's really, kind of a disservice and a misunderstanding of the Thunder. But I'll tell you what. I kind of like how Shea and the Thunder get under everybody's nerves. They drive them crazy. They remind, because they're this younger team. I'm not sure. They're clearly not a millennial team, right? Like, I guess maybe they're Gen Alpha. I don't know where we would put them.
I don't know. Lost track.
But you know how it is with younger brothers, right? Or younger sisters, younger siblings. They always drive the older brothers and sisters nuts, right? Oh, why are you wearing that goofy outfit to school? Why are you doing this, that, and the other thing? And I just think it's the perfect way for like a torch to get passed here, right? Like there's supposed to be a little friction. There was friction when the Warriors came up and were shooting all the threes. Nobody liked that the first time around. So, that's why I say the complaints to me are more annoying than Shea's behavior. I think all the whining about the calls drives me crazier than whatever Shea does on the court.
And, the other thing I'll add about Shea, I appreciate his demeanor on the court so much because if there is one thing that I find extremely annoying about the whole league is the constant badgering of officials on so many calls throughout the entire game by players on both teams. It's just the relentless whining in the NBA is not good for the viewer. That's number one. Shea doesn't put up much of a fuss. Like, correct. His demeanor out there is very stoic and businesslike and extremely focused. And unlike Harden, who I felt was an Academy Award winner for a lot of the fouls that were called on him on his penetration, I agree with you. Almost not all, but almost all of the fouls are fouls because Shea is so good at initiating contact in the act of shooting and finishing through it, which forces the defender to commit a foul. So and the other thing I give Shea a utmost credit for is the way he gets himself back into the offensive flow by using his mid-range game. Yep. It's not just shooting the three like we've talked about many times, Ben. It's not just shooting the three. It's not just getting to the rim. That magnificent mid-range game of his allows his Thunder team to only have to take 21 threes and still score 114 points while Minnesota takes 51 and gets 88. So the efficiency that he has, that the Thunder have, and allowing that to be not just a part of, but an important part of their repertoire on offense is really admirable.
No question. I want to go back to your point about his comportment on the court because I think it's a crucial one. Not only does he hardly ever really go at the referees, None of his teammates do. And you maybe would be surprised by that because they're not star level players, but that's discipline from the coaching staff, right? That's saying, hey, if you're going to get a technical foul or you're going to scream at an official, like, you're not going to get to play. I mean, clearly they have got those guys drilled. Now, Mark Dagnall, he will make some comments towards refs during games, but it's not over the top usually. If he's a very principled guy, so if he really feels like he was done wrong, he'll take a technical every once in a while, and then he will state his team's case in the post-game press conferences, right, or the pre-game press conferences. And I think that they've just decided this is how we're going to work with the referee apparatus, right? We're going to make our case when we're calm, when it's a formal media situation, everyone's going to be able to hear us. And then during the game, we're just going to play basketball, right? And if we get the calls, we don't get the calls, whatever, we move on. And, Chris Finch and the Timberwolves were whining about these calls from Shea all the way back in February, and they clearly came into that game annoyed. Like, they were preemptively annoyed by Shea, right? As soon as he gets fouled, Ant throws the ball at him, right? In the second quarter, Ant standing over the top of him. Jalen McDaniels is getting all these whistles. He winds up fouling out. He's incredibly frustrated, and it really got into their head. And Finch was like, we talked about it coming in. We've got to have the next play mentality. It's very difficult to flip that switch, right? If you start to think you're kind of, the victim, or you're being persecuted, or the refs are out to get you, it's really hard to break out of the mentality. And I would point to some of the very best players, Luka Doncic, Caitlin Clark. They take it too far, right? They get themselves distracted by all this referee stuff. I think there's a lot of very high level players who could learn from Shea. The most important thing to do is to be unfazed. If Anthony Edwards stands over you, you don't have to prove your manhood to him. You can just stand up and continue to play basketball, right? If he flips the ball at you, you don't have to go get up in his chest and scream at him and talk trash and, try to, prove that you're this macho guy. It's not necessary. Just go down and score the next time you get the basketball. Everyone's going to give you your credit, right? And these are some of the reasons, by the way, why we assume that Shea's going to be named MVP tonight, right? It's a big part of his game is his emotional temperament, the level-headedness, the poise. That's really what drives the Thunder. If they get down 10, they never panic, right? And if they get up 20, they're never satisfied. They just keep going. It's very hard to have that robotic type mentality. Very few players have it, but it is such an asset for this group.
That was some of my conversation with Ben Golliver. You can hear the whole interview on our Deep Dive Basketball Show podcast that we'll be posting after the show today. And I always say this, it's always worth the time to listen to Ben Golliver's commentary. So we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to talk to the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who we touched on with Ben. Alan Horton will be with us here on the Basketball Show on Sports 1440.